Ryan Romano had died countless times, by his own hand or that of others. Yet one death surpassed them all, the death that made him stop caring and taught him to enjoy life, the perfect death from which no one should return. This was the story of that death. This was the story of Monaco. On April 1, 2017, in the village of La Turbie, France, the sun was setting behind the horizon while the city of Monaco gleamed below. Standing at the edge of the Tête de Chien promontory, with his motorcycle and travel bag nearby, Ryan observed his target carefully. Although he had left Italy 5 years earlier, he considered this the moment of truth. Technically, it had been 3 months since his departure, but he had relived those months repeatedly. He had toured the Mediterranean coasts searching for any sign of Len and her submarine. He knew they had planned to go to America before their separation, but she could not have crossed the Atlantic. She must have stopped somewhere closer, within his reach. However, Ryan was beginning to lose hope. He had searched Greece, Spain, France, and every place he could think of. He had wandered the post-war wasteland and found nothing. If she had left Europe entirely, relocated underwater or on a distant island, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. There was only one place around the Mediterranean Sea he had not yet visited, the country everyone warned him against, the place no one returned from. Monaco, Ryan said as he observed the coastal city. It looked nice, for lack of a better term, and that bothered him. First, the microstate was still standing, which was unusual. Monaco had once been one of Europe's most luxurious coastal resorts, a den for gamblers and millionaires, and somehow it still looked the part after the apocalypse. The bombs, robots, and nano-plagues seemed to have stopped at its border. The buildings and houses showed no signs of degradation, yet Ryan saw no one in the streets. Boats and yachts floated in the sea, empty cars lined the driveways, and not a sound could be heard, not even birdsong. "I know I'm tempting fate by saying this," Ryan muttered to himself, as he often did to ease his loneliness, "but I've got a bad feeling about this." He saved this moment just in case. Many had gone to Monaco searching for supplies, elixirs, or safe haven, but none returned. None of those people could time travel either. "Well, guess this is the last chance, shorty," Ryan said as he climbed onto his motorcycle and drove toward the city. "If you aren't in the place nobody returns from." He could always try to cross the ocean to America, if it still existed, but most likely he would have to face the obvious, that Len was gone. Ryan had made his presence known, sending signals through radio towers and any communication channels he could find. If she had not contacted him yet, she was either unable to respond or dead. He did not know what to do if he gave up on his friend. His quest to find Len had guided him through countless restarts, and he had no other purpose in life. The time traveler had felt adrift since Bloodstream's death, and not even his power could counter his gnawing sense of solitude. Without Len, his existence had no meaning. Ryan pushed these thoughts aside, mounted his motorcycle, and followed the path down toward Monaco. At the city's official frontier, he noticed a badly painted sign on the roadside. "The armies of Andorra shall never conquer our great nation." Ryan read aloud. Wasn't Andorra another microstate? The apocalypse had indeed caused all the weirdos to crawl out of hiding. He drove through Monaco's streets, and to his surprise, nothing terrible happened. He did not instantly fall dead, nor was he ambushed by a crazy psycho. It was almost disappointing. However, Ryan sensed a pervading tension in the air. The streets were clean, cars parked perfectly, and streetlights worked flawlessly, though the city needed to import electricity from the French Republic, which had long collapsed. Peering through house windows, he found them empty. Ryan made his way to Monaco's most famous landmark, the Place du Casino. The Monte Carlo Casino stood strong and proud, its 19th century grandeur preserved from the apocalypse. The clock above the entrance remained stuck at 12, though the lights in the fountain outside still worked, surrounded by lush lawns and floral arrangements. He called out, "Is there someone here?" But only heavy silence answered. Before he could decide what to do next, the plaza vanished in a flash of yellow and violet. In an instant, Ryan found himself inside a luxurious marble hallway. Paintings adorned the walls, chandeliers provided light, and the room led toward large wooden doors. After a brief moment of surprise, Ryan looked around and found himself back against a wall with only his bag of supplies. Had he been teleported somewhere else? He examined the paintings, most in a surrealist style reminiscent of René Magritte. One, titled The Genesis, showed two gloved hands opening an alchemist wonderbox. Another, The Triumph of Monaco, depicted an army of golden men overrunning Mecran's robots. Perplexed, Ryan grabbed his bag and walked down the hallway to the doors at the end. Above them, a brightly painted sign read, "Monte Carlo Grand Opening." Next to it, words were crudely carved into the marble wall. "Don't trust the clowns, they will eat your heart." Ryan continued reading more advice carved into the stone. "Follow the arrows to the suites before it goes dark." Another hurriedly carved sentence warned, "Don't use the stairs, take the elevator." Lowering his gaze, Ryan noticed arrows carved on the floor. More confused than ever, he opened the wooden doors and stepped into the next room. He entered a replica of the Monte Carlo Casino, or at least what he had seen in pre-war pictures. His footsteps echoed in a vast lobby supported by pillars, the ground replaced with a giant roulette table featuring meter-wide tokens. Candelabras hung from the ceiling, casting light over the pinnacle of 19th century luxury. Ryan glanced at the windows, all walled off with marble. "Hello, dear guest," a voice spoke from Ryan's left, someone having sneaked up on him. Startled, Ryan stepped back and tried to activate his time-stop ability, but felt it strain against an invisible force. Time refused to stop. Panicking, Ryan drew a gun hidden beneath his clothes, only to realize his mistake. The creature before him looked human only superficially. Its skin was unnaturally white, and a clownish mask made of solid gold served as its face. It wore a croupier's costume, complete with bow tie, old jacket, and gloves. "Welcome to Monaco," the clown said cheerfully, the gold mask moving unnaturally with each word. Its eyes and mouth oozed darkness. "The greatest country on earth. How may I assist you?" Ryan tried again to stop time, but something prevented his ability from activating. If he died within these walls, he kept his gun pointed at the clown creature and asked, "Where am I, Pennywise?" The golden clown explained that they were in Monaco, the greatest and most prosperous nation on earth, established by the divine providence of His Highness Jean Stephanie. A bronze-faced clown entered the lobby, also dressed as a croupier and carrying a silver plate, offering Ryan a drink. Ryan repeated the name Jean Stephanie, unsure which clown to shoot first. The golden clown proudly declared that His Highness Jean Stephanie I was the sovereign prince of Monaco, conqueror of Liechtenstein and San Marino, having risen from humble birth to ascend the throne in 2005 after everyone else was dead. It added that since then, Jean Stephanie had defended Monaco against the Andorran hordes trying to destroy the nation. The bronze clown then offered to show Ryan the 5-star restaurant or a game of roulette. Ryan asked why the windows were walled off and where the exit was, noticing arrows on the floor pointing west. The bronze clown chuckled and questioned why anyone would want to leave Monaco, the greatest nation on earth. Ryan insisted that he did want to leave, but the bronze clown reminded him he was a guest, invited and served during opening hours, their masks morphing into disturbing smiles. Their kindness felt fake and forced, making Ryan increasingly uneasy. He promised to come back later and followed the arrows, but the golden clown warned that they would be closing soon, their posture turning threatening as the bronze clown followed. Ryan raised his gun at them, noticing more clowns entering the lobby, dressed as croupiers with bronze, silver, or gold masks, stalking him silently like a pack of wolves. The bronze clown insisted they only wanted to help, existing to serve man, but Ryan found their tone creepy. Recalling a message at the entrance, Ryan followed the arrows to an open elevator between two stairways, noticing bear traps and wires on the stairs. With no other way out, he entered the elevator, threatening the clowns with his gun. Seeing a sign labeled "Here" next to the 4th floor button, Ryan smashed it. The elevator doors closed as a dozen masked creatures glared at him in eerie silence. A male voice announced over the elevator loudspeaker that due to a national emergency, the Monte Carlo Casino would close early, assuring that as long as His Highness Jean Stephanie protected them, the armies of Andorra would never destroy the principality. When the elevator reached the 4th floor with a ding, the lights went out and the doors closed behind Ryan. He heard a sound below, someone triggering the wire trap. Sensing danger, Ryan activated his cell phone's torchlight and saw a hallway leading to hotel suites, with walls and doors reinforced by steel plates. Only room 44 had light coming through, so he knocked on its door, shouting for someone, but received no answer. The elevator doors opened again and 6 clowns emerged, this time silent and carrying silver forks and knives, with napkins around their necks. Ryan opened fire, trying to stop time once more, but his power failed and a silver clown took a bullet to the face without slowing down. The suite's door opened and a man stepped out, built like Conan the Barbarian, wearing a scavenged outfit of an American football helmet and pads reinforced with medieval armor, carrying a shotgun. The man spoke in French, clocking his shotgun and ordering Ryan to move out. Ryan stepped aside as the man fired, blasting a bronze clown apart, which leaked white liquid instead of blood. The other clowns pushed the corpse aside and rushed at them with hungry looks. The man shouted for Ryan to go, and they fled into the suite, which he quickly locked behind them. The clowns screamed and pounded on the metal door, but it held. The armored man shouted through the door that one day, before our arthritis took him, he would go kamikaze on them and kill every last one. He then asked Ryan if he was alright. Ryan caught his breath and looked around the luxurious 19th century French style suite, noting the white walls, marble, walled windows, sofa, TV, library, bar counter, and a hole dug into one wall with a pickaxe nearby. The man switched to Italian, asking if Ryan was Italian and what his name was. Ryan replied gruffly that his name was Ryan Romano. The man introduced himself as Simon, sheriff of Sweetstown, and brought out 2 glasses and a bottle of brandy, asking for the date outside. Ryan answered it was April 1st, 2017. Simon sighed heavily, noting that Ryan had been trapped for 12 years, and asked if the planet was still irradiated. Ryan confirmed it was, then demanded to know where they were and if this was Monte Carlo. Simon said it was not hell, but the real Monaco, the place no one returned from. An alarm echoed, and Simon grabbed a landline phone from beneath the counter, answering, "Yeah, Martine." Though Ryan didn't understand the conversation, he heard a woman's voice on the other end of the line. Simon told Martine that a new man had arrived and the croupiers had followed him, assuring her he was safe and not to worry. Simon then looked Ryan dead in the eyes and asked if he had weapons in his bag. Ryan listed 3 guns, bullets, medical supplies, food, and water. Simon approved and said he would ask Ryan to share, emphasizing that no selfish freeloaders were allowed. Simon then focused back on the phone, confirming plans to meet Martine the next day and telling her to take care. After Simon hung up, Ryan asked if he was the sheriff of Sweetstown, noticing a copy of Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus on the counter. Simon explained that about 40 people were spread across the 4th floor, and he was responsible for securing the elevator border and maintaining traps on the stairs. Forcing the croupiers to use the elevator created a bottleneck that made them manageable. Ryan inquired about someone named Len Sabino, describing her as having black hair, blue eyes, and Marxist-Leninist beliefs who must have arrived a year ago. Simon said he hadn't seen any communists and had been there for a while, but people who arrived during the opening hours were lucky. Those who came at the wrong time got eaten. Simon gestured toward the door to emphasize his point. Ryan prayed Len was still alive. When he asked if there were other safe places, Simon bluntly stated there was no other sanctuary or exit, only the suites as safe zones. Something kept the hostile entities out, but only if the doors were locked. Simon promised to find Ryan a suite of his own and gave him a fiendish smirk, telling him he would stay there for a while. The clown's assault lasted 10 hours, with them screaming and hitting the door without rest. When the lights returned in the hallway, the attack stopped abruptly. The clowns calmed and returned to the lower floor, revealing they only became hostile during closed hours. The next day, Simon introduced Ryan to Martine, the community's mayor, a 28-year-old blonde living 4 rooms ahead of the elevator border. She quickly briefed him on the situation. Everyone in the town had similar stories. They came to Monaco unaware or underestimating the danger and ended up teleported into the entrance hallway. Simon had been there the longest, arriving a few months after the Genome Wars started. Nobody else had powers, and Ryan's time-stop ability didn't work in that strange place. Though he sensed it activating, an opposing force canceled it at the last moment. As Ryan learned more, he realized the Monte Carlo Casino was a pocket dimension. Except for the suite floor, every room was a variant of 8 types: a kitchen, restaurant, a giant roulette table, a lobby, a slot machines room, a retail shop, a card game arena, a stocking area, and a theater. Each room led to another in an ever-changing configuration, forming a giant maze with only the elevator and entrance hallway as landmarks. Explorers estimated the area covered at least 8 square kilometers, 4 times the size of Monaco itself, with new rooms continuously discovered. It reminded Ryan of a dungeon crawl video game with computer-generated rooms, but far less amusing. At least the coffee and restaurants restocked regularly, though nobody knew how. Someone once placed a camera in a kitchen to record the phenomenon, showing food and water magically appearing during the closed hours. Ryan wasn't certain if his save point still worked. He had died a dozen times, each experience harrowing. Many claimed death was peaceful, but they clearly never died before. The community divided into groups with specific tasks, from explorers mapping the maze to gatherers searching for food. Since Ryan was experienced with firearms, he quickly became Simon's deputy and received his own suite next to the elevator. At that moment, Ryan was escorting Martine's group on a food scavenging mission and regretted it. A silver clown approached Ryan, presenting a plate of exquisite shrimps and salmon toasts as gifts from their chef, greeting him with false affability. Ryan threatened the croupier with a gun and told him to screw off. Martine, less categorical, swiped all the toasts away and put them in a bag. The clowns were completely friendly during opening hours, which made them even creepier in Ryan's mind. They switched from false affability to murderous hunger eerily fast and were frighteningly good at sneaking up on people. Worse, the Monte Carlo Casino often closed early at the whim of whatever force controlled the loudspeakers. The first time it happened, with only 5 minutes to return to the suites, Ryan thought his last hour had come. He made a mad dash to the elevator and narrowly escaped death. A voice echoed through the loudspeakers, announcing a great day for Monaco and celebrating a victory against the Duke of Luxembourg, declaring the blood of their enemies would paint their yachts. Monaco had been at war with Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Andorra, and San Marino, but never the same one each day. The voice continued, praising Jean, Stephanie. Martine told Ryan she wasn't sure Jean, Stephanie existed, as nobody had ever seen him, not even the clowns. One creature interjected that His Highness was beyond comprehension but was ignored, repeating the praise. Ryan suggested the voice might be a psycho, and since it interfered with his power, it was probably a violet. Martine offered that perhaps the power sustained the voice. They returned to the suite's floor, and Ryan reported no progress with his radio. Some scavenged books included manuals and pre-wars technology magazines, giving Ryan hope he could build a radio powerful enough to call for rescue. It was a fool's hope, but until someone found an exit, it was all they had. Martine invited Ryan to watch a movie that night, mentioning she found a cassette of La Grande Vadrouille. Ryan declined, stopping in front of Simon's room to check on him. Martine sighed, saying she didn't understand why Simon kept digging, but guessed he was occupying himself the best way he could. Ryan shrugged, unlocked Simon's door with his deputy key, and entered. After closing the door behind him, he made his way to the hole in the wall, activated a torchlight, and walked inside. It took more than an hour before he heard the sound of a pickaxe hitting stone. Simon was busy digging with a torchlight strapped to his helmet. Ryan announced his presence, telling Simon they had shrimp for dinner. Simon complained he would kill for a hamburger and asked how long Ryan had been with them. Ryan replied 6 months. Simon told Ryan that 6 months meant 2 more until the menu changed, as it did every Christmas. He shared a story about a man with a puppy dog who kept sending him pictures of the barking animal, which annoyed him so much that he eventually tasted the puppy. Simon described it as a Christmas gift to himself. Ryan, uncomfortable, asked for clarification, and Simon explained that God had put him on earth to eat puppies, comparing the rabid clowns outside to puppies. Ryan realized that years trapped inside a hotel suite had taken a toll on Simon's sanity and asked how long the tunnel was now. Simon replied 2 kilometers and said he had energy for 10 more. Ryan expressed doubt about finding an exit and questioned why Simon kept digging. Simon referenced Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, explaining that Sisyphus found freedom by accepting the futility of his task, rolling a boulder for eternity. Simon said he had accepted the meaninglessness of their situation and was at peace, while Ryan still hoped to escape and grew frustrated. Simon dismissed Ryan's hope, saying he didn't believe anyone was waiting outside. He advised Ryan to accept absurdity and roll with it like Sisyphus. When Ryan asked what would happen if the tunnel led to another suite instead of an exit, Simon smiled and said he would find a new wall and dig another hole. Ryan repeated Simon's phrase about the boulder being his friend, and Simon corrected him, saying it was his only friend. In December 2035, Sweets Town had changed little except the menu. No one had entered the maze for years, likely because people had learned the dangers or because their abductor had died. The community's numbers had halved from nearly 50 to about 20, 5 due to clown attacks and despair. Simon committed harakiri as promised, going out one night with a cigar, vodka, and shotgun. The croupiers failed to kill him, but his heart gave out from battle stress. The creatures did not eat his body, and the villagers burned his corpse and buried his bones beneath the bar he loved. Ryan took over as sheriff and inherited Simon's suite. Now, Ryan faced the tunnel, wondering what to do with it. Simon had reached 5 kilometers before his death and left his worn pickaxe by the entrance. Ryan muttered Simon's phrase about the boulder being his friend as he grabbed the pickaxe. By December 2101, Ryan was the last man in Monaco. He rested on his bed with food nearby, writing his memoirs in a journal to help any future trapped souls. Over a century, he had explored the Monte Carlo Casino farther than anyone but learned little more. The maze was infinite, with systems working without electricity, phones connecting rooms even when cut off, no central communication, and no origin for the staff. The place was a conceptual space shaped by the maker's will, likely the work of a yellow genome, though Ryan could never confirm it. Ryan tried everything: radios, bombs, blowing up the entrance hallway, dissecting clowns, and occult rituals, but nothing worked. He believed escape was possible but had no proof. 2 decades earlier, when only 5 survivors remained, most chose to end their lives, but Ryan refused, having died too many times already. A clown knocked on Ryan's suite door, inviting him to a baccarat tournament downstairs, but Ryan Ryan declined, refusing to leave his bed. The clowns waited day and night for him to die like predators stalking an old lion, but Ryan resisted out of spite. As a genome, Ryan had aged gracefully, maintaining middle-aged vigor despite his wrinkles and advanced age. However, his health deteriorated suddenly a year ago, possibly due to the elixir's expiration or the toll of living without natural light, fresh air, or company. 30 days prior, he realized he could barely move from his bed but had prepared food and water reserves. Ryan regretted not choosing a suicide run like Simon to deny their captor's satisfaction. His eyes wandered to the tunnel, which he had nearly extended 15 kilometers before his body failed him, a lasting regret. Most of all, he regretted never finding Len or knowing what happened to her. Despite gaining knowledge and skills over the years, he never discovered how the world continued beyond the walls. He would die with unfinished business, and that was the most ignominious part. Ryan acknowledged that it had been a life, at least. He had defeated Bloodstream and ensured he would never kill again. Though he hadn't done everything possible, he had tried. As he closed his eyes for the last time, the Wanderer believed he found the acceptance Simon had preached to him long ago. Acceptance did not bring happiness, but it brought closure. Ryan slept. He woke again, facing a bright light. Raising his hand, he shielded his eyes from the overwhelming radiance that burned with brilliance and felt a strange force brushing his cheeks. It was wind. As he adjusted to the light, Ryan realized he faced the sun. His hand was no longer wrinkled, his legs could carry him, and he felt young and strong again. He breathed fresh air for the first time in almost a century. Looking down at Monaco from above, he quickly understood where he was, the same stone promontory where he had last saved nearly a century ago. He remembered dying in Monaco, and his power. Perhaps the pocket dimension prevented the time stop but not the save point. Yet the way he perished could only be explained by one thing. Deep within his bones, Ryan knew he had died of old age. And now it all started over, again. Collapsing to his knees, Ryan realized he could not die of old age. He was immortal. It would never end. He would always start over, forever. Even Monaco could not undo the save point, and old age could not cancel it. He chuckled to himself, then exploded into nervous laughter, rolling on the stone near his motorcycle. He laughed until the sun vanished and his throat grew sore. Later, he rested on his back, staring silently at the stars for half an hour. When he rose and looked at the stars again, Ryan felt nothing. He had once feared death, the pain, the loss, the oblivion, but that was before. Now, death no longer scared him or felt painful. Knowing that even old age would not keep him down for long, he had grown numb. Ryan Romano was condemned to live, to carry the boulder up the hill and begin again. He recalled Simon's words and realized the old man might have been right. He was Sisyphus reborn, and his life was absurd. Instead of horror, Ryan felt liberation. He muttered to himself, looking down at Monaco. He no longer cared. If condemned to live, he would live fully. He was no longer afraid and had all the time in the world to see how everything could play out, to try everything worth doing. His life was an endless game with the sky as the limit. He was free to do anything. Right now, Ryan wanted to free Simon, Martine, and everyone trapped in this hellish place. If his life were a video game, this would be his first quest, the first of many, but far from the last. After seeing the bad end, he would settle for nothing less than the perfect ending. Ryan had embraced the absurd and learned to love the boulder. Sitting on a sofa next to an inactive plushie, Ryan stared into the abyss of the Tyrrhenian Sea. He found it relaxing to wake up to the silent darkness and mutated fish, especially after growing used to New Rome's noisy environment. Each underwater apartment was a carbon copy of the others, with tenants free to decorate as they wished. Ryan had brought his entire wardrobe and scattered euro bills around to protect himself from the specter of Vladimir Lenin, which haunted the underwater Kremlin. Len had borrowed the Meta's submarine during the raid. The vehicle now waited outside the underwater habitats, visible from Ryan's apartment. While the submarine had allowed Len to smuggle the Plymouth Fury to her base, it also meant the Meta gang could reach the area if they wished. Ryan kept this in mind for future loops. Jokingly, Ryan told the plushie not to do anything rash as he rose from the sofa and walked through the corridors linking the habitats. Shorty's lair was next door, likely because she worried Ryan might influence the kids without surveillance. Near her habitat, Len had established a workshop. Unlike the comfortable apartments, this part of the base resembled a steampunk factory with metal walls and steam pipes. It was less equipped and organized than Vulcan's workshop. Len had hooked the servers administering the base to Dynami's brainscan machine, while half-finished machines cluttered the workbenches. Designs of submarines, underwater cocoons, and artificial fish hung on the walls to save space. In a corner, Ryan's Plymouth Fury waited. Len had removed the Chronoradio's components, the engine, and nearly all genius tech inside. Ryan knew it was a sacrifice for the cause, but seeing his beloved car reduced to a husk filled him with sorrow. Len listened to Alexandrov Ensemble's March of the Artillerymen while working. Ryan admitted it was a good song, but his genius friend could not look more Marxist. Someone else was already annoying her that day. Little Sarah complained to Len carrying a cat. The genius sat behind a workbench working on Dynami's tech. Sarah reminded Len that she had promised her a suit to become the little diver. Len, wearing simple blue clothes instead of her jumpsuit, explained she had to work on something else first. She turned to Ryan and greeted him. Ryan greeted them back and recognized the cat as Eugene Henry. Sarah said the cat had appeared in her room that morning and asked if Ryan had brought him from the surface to the magical place. Ryan replied that the cat had brought himself, petting the placid feline behind the ears. The cat's teleportation ability had an enormous range. Ryan insisted on calling the base the Kami Cave, despite Len's frown and preference for the Arkansas. He explained that corpos were cowardly and superstitious, and to instill fear in their hearts, they must abolish private property. Len rolled her eyes and asked what they would call themselves if this was a bat cave. Ryan immediately answered the Hammer and the Sickle, the perfect union of peasant and working-class superheroes, with the children as their minions, the proletariat. Len let out a small sound Ryan had not heard in centuries. Sarah asked if that was Ma, having never heard it before. Ryan asked Len if she had chuckled. She tried to look away to hide her expression, but he persisted, claiming even she must admit his jokes were funny. Len denied it, trying not to smirk, saying Ryan was so bad he looped back to good, like a boomerang. Ryan replied that all his jokes were state, approved by their Soviet Supreme. Len now wore a warm smile that Ryan thought was worth all the runs so far. She told him she was not like that, calling him Riri. Little Sarah, petting Eugene Henry, asked what a Soviet Supreme was. Ryan frowned at Len, surprised she hadn't sent Sarah to the party congress, warning that the children would be lost without a good revolutionary education. Len shook her head, still smiling, admitting she hadn't thought much about education because she had been too focused on building the place first. Sarah repeated her question about the Soviet Supreme before glaring at Ryan and demanding he explain. Ryan truthfully said it was a bad idea and patted Sarah on the head, telling her that was all she would ever know. Sarah stuck out her tongue at him, prompting Eugene Henry to meow loudly and leap from her hands to claim a server as his throne, looking down like a noble sphinx. Len asked Sarah to leave them for a moment, saying she needed to discuss something privately with Ryan. Sarah looked suspiciously at both of them but obeyed, saying, "Yes, Ma," before leaving. Once Sarah was gone, Ryan sat on the workbench and asked if Len was happy now that the children would think they did adult things behind closed doors, though they had done so long ago. Len's face turned embarrassed, calling it awkward. Ryan reminded her it was their first time and that they had to do it quickly so her father wouldn't notice, adding that he remembered it fondly. Len remained silent, likely because they were discussing an era long past. Ryan still longed for the emotional intimacy they once shared and wondered if that was what he sought with Jasmine, the echo of something once vibrant but long dead.